That was our defense correspondent Kim Hyun-bin. And let's go over to our Kwon Soa at Seoul's Foreign Affairs Ministry for the international reaction and efforts to make Pyongyang pay the price for its latest violation. Soa, what is the latest there?
Conn-young, Seoul's foreign ministry is on high alert, and officials here have been making contact with their partners around the world ever since North Korea's rocket launch earlier this morning. Now, the U.S. and Japan were quick to respond to and condemn the North's act, with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe calling it absolutely unacceptable. Now, Seoul's Foreign Minister Yun Byung-se earlier told reporters here at the ministry that he will hold talks with U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry and Japanese Foreign Minister Fumio Kishida on the North's latest threat. In fact, the talks with Kishida have been said to have ended just around 10 to 20 minutes ago, so we will have updates on that later probably. Now, Yoon also said that the talks with Kerry could also continue at the annual Munich Security Conference later this month, that both of them will attend, and that he is considering a trip to New York if necessary to discuss further details with UN Security Council member states. Now, South Korea currently is not one of them. Yoon also reaffirmed that efforts are ongoing at the Council on Pyongyang's earlier violation, its nuclear test a month ago.
As talks on a new resolution against North Korea's fourth nuclear test are in progress, the rocket launch is expected to spur further discussions at the UN Security Council. In addition to the UN measures, South Korea is also putting an effort to enforce separate bilateral sanctions, as I have discussed with our partners, such as the US, Japan, the EU, and Australia.
Now, South Korea's top nuclear envoy Hwang Jung-guk also held phone talks with his U.S. counterpart Sung Kim and with his Japanese counterpart Kimihiro Ishikane on the matter.
So we have also learned that UN Security Council is expected to gather for an emergency meeting at 1 a.m. Korea time. That's in about 7 hours.
That's right, Conn-young. According to Seoul's foreign ministry, South Korea, the U.S., and Japan called for the talks at the UN Security Council meeting. And prior to that, Seoul also made a separate request right after the launch. And that's why the 15 members are expected to convene for the talks, as you said, at the UN headquarters in New York on Sunday, 11 a.m. And that's Monday at 1 a.m. South Korea time. Now, the Council is still in the midst of drafting a new resolution for its fourth nuclear test from January 6th. And that's why there is a lot of attention on how Pyongyang's missile test will affect the sanctions, meaning whether additional stronger measures will be taken or if there could even be another new resolution. Now, in a document to the UN Security Council that states South Korea's stance on seeking punitive measures, it says, quote, an extraordinary threat requires an extraordinary response. So we'll have to see how strong the consequences for the North will be this time around. That's all I have for now, but I'll have more updates in our later newscast. I'm Kwon Soa reporting live from South Korea's Foreign Affairs Ministry.